All right, today we're going to dive into this fantastic story. It's an ancient tale, but trust me, it holds a secret to a problem every single one of us has faced. What do you do when you're up against a challenge that just feels, well, completely impossible? You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? That feeling when you set some huge, amazing goal. Maybe it's learning a new language, or finishing a massive project at work, or even just making a big personal change. You look at that mountain of work in front of you and you just freeze. It feels way too big. Well, you are definitely not alone. So our story kicks off in the city of Savathi. We meet this really sincere guy who decides to become a monk. He is fired up, full of passion, totally ready to dedicate his whole life to the spiritual path. He was 100% in. But then, boom, reality hits. His teachers hand him the rule book, and as you can see here, it wasn't just a book, it was more like a whole library. We're talking an unbelievably long and complex list of precepts, rules for everything, minor daily actions, major moral conduct, how you should eat, even how you should think. For this brand new monk, it was just a crushing, overwhelming weight. And he just spirals into despair. He looks at this mountain of rules and feels like a total failure before he's even started. The task was so huge, the standard of perfection so high, that he decided there was only one thing to do: quit. Just give up on this new life entirely. Now, his teachers saw how distressed he was, and instead of just telling him to, try harder, they did something incredibly wise. They took him to the one person who could give him some real clarity: the Buddha himself. So when the Buddha heard about the monk's problem, he didn't launch into a long lecture or pile on more rules. No, he did the exact opposite. He simplified everything, all the way down to a single powerful idea, wrapped up in one little number: 3. The solution was just beautiful in its simplicity. The Buddha told him, hey, forget that long list for now, just focus on guarding 3 doors. First, as you see here, your body, that means your actions. Second, your speech, your words. And third, your mind, your thoughts. That's it, just 3 simple things to focus on. And the change was instant. It was like a light bulb went off. The monk's despair, poof, it just vanished. All that crushing weight was lifted and his heart was suddenly filled with joy. A path that felt like a tangled, impossible jungle just moments before was now a straight, clear, and totally manageable road. For the first time, he knew exactly where to start. So what happened? Well, the monk took this advice to heart, and within just a few days, he actually attained enlightenment. The other monks were, of course, absolutely blown away. How in the world did he progress so fast? To explain this powerful principle, the Buddha shared another story, a parable from one of his own past lives. In this life, he was just a simple farmer. And one day, he's out plowing this old, forgotten field, and his plow just slams into something solid, something that absolutely would not budge. At first, he thinks, oh, it's just a big tree root, but he decides to dig around it anyway. And it was not a root. It was a kancha kandanda, you can see the Thai term here, which means a massive, solid bar of gold. We're talking as thick as a person's thigh and several feet long. An unbelievable treasure, right? But here's the catch. It was completely immovable, way too heavy for one person to lift. It was an impossible prize. So this brings us right to the heart of the puzzle. You've just found the fortune of a lifetime, but you can't even lift it. It's too big, too heavy. What do you do? I mean, how do you move something that is, for all intents and purposes, immovable? And here's the genius part. The farmer didn't even try to lift it with his muscles. First, he lifted it with his mind. He just stood there and mentally divided that giant bar into 4 manageable chunks and gave each one a purpose. One piece was for his living expenses, another was for savings, a third to reinvest in his farm, and the last part was for charity. This right here, this is the secret. The very moment he broke the task down in his mind, the second that one single impossible bar became 4 possible pieces, the story says the gold itself felt light. And then he was able to lift it and carry it home. So let's connect the dots here, because it's pretty amazing. On one side, you've got a giant, immovable gold bar. On the other, a crushing, endless list of spiritual rules. They seem like totally different problems, right? But look, they were solved with the exact same strategy. You make the impossible possible by breaking it down into smaller, meaningful parts. And that was the monk's big aha moment. He finally understood that all those thousands of detailed rules weren't really separate things to memorize. They were all just expressions of those 3 core principles.
If he could just guard his actions, his words, and his thoughts, he was already living the spirit of all the other rules. The burden became light because he found the simple core inside the complex whole.
So this is so much more than just a couple of ancient stories. It is a deeply practical strategy for any challenge we're facing today, whether that's at work, with our personal goals, or on our own path of self-improvement.
The teaching ends with this beautiful verse, and what it's telling us is that when we approach our big goals with a positive mindset, when we understand that real progress happens incrementally, step by tiny step, we can overcome even the biggest obstacles. It's not about one giant, heroic leap. It's about all the small, manageable steps along the way.
And so that really leaves us with a question to reflect on. What's your immovable gold bar? What is that overwhelming project or goal in your life right now that just feels impossible? And how can you, starting today, begin to mentally divide it into smaller, more meaningful, and more manageable pieces?
Thank you so much for joining me for this. The text you see on the screen is a simple and warm blessing in Thai. It just means, may you all be happy.